Our story begins in a very different way. Someone is shouting Mumyong's name, and we see a boy lying on the ground. He thought it was just a voice from the heavens, but someone told him to protect this child, since he would be his reason to live. He was Cheon Wigang, the head of the Cheon family, and what seemed to be our protagonist reflected on the boy, thinking that back then he did not really know that this child would grow into a despicable scoundrel who would ruin the Cheon family. Even so, he bowed and said he would accept the order. 15 years passed, and suddenly the head of the family had died. Cheon Muryang's dishonest behavior only grew worse, and the Cheon family, once part of the 10 great clans, was reduced to nothing in an instant. Many people left the Cheon family, but he stayed by Muryang's side, fighting for him. He devoted himself to being his personal bodyguard, until one day a woman arrived at the Cheon family's gate and, suddenly, he himself stabbed his bodyguard, our protagonist. He wondered why. Why would he do this? Was his sword truly worth all that devotion? He simply fell to his knees while leaning on the blade, and he thought he heard someone say that people could not be fixed. Then the assassins began to surround Cheon, while he only cried in shock. In his thoughts, our protagonist asked Cheon if he was really so stupid to think they would spare him if he handed over his own head. Did he really think the family would be revived with the help of the demonic cult? Did he truly believe that was the right way to live? He was wrong. A beam of light then fell upon the 4 of them, revealing their evil faces and leaving Cheon terrified. He continued, saying that if he truly wanted to live, he should never have brought them into his house. The old man simply cut off Cheon's head with a sword. Our protagonist said that from the beginning, he should never have served the young master of the Cheon family. He wondered if the family head was watching this, because the young master had not been worth protecting. He thought he should have abandoned that scoundrel that day, until he let his sword fall, but as the rain poured down, he said that wasn't it. It didn't matter whose fault it was anymore. He only felt deep regret. He reflected that he had not even had a name originally, but after being taken in by the Cheon family, they had called him Mumyong, which meant someone without a name. Smiling, he thought that if he were to be reborn, he hoped it would at least be as someone with a name. Then all the assassins attacked him at once, and Mumyong hoped he would not be reborn as himself in the next life. And so, Mumyong, the nameless one, died. Shortly after, he felt cold and wondered if death was like this. But he realized a woman was washing his feet. Startled, he screamed, frightening her as well. He wondered what was happening, whether he was truly alive, yet he was certain countless swords had pierced his body. The woman bowed while crying, apologizing to the young master. She said she had not noticed the water had grown cold and would heat some right away. Mumyong asked if she wasn't Walyong. He recalled that she was the personal maid who had served the young master since childhood, the same girl who had always been abused by him. She kept apologizing, begging him to forgive her mistake. He wondered why she was calling him young master and asked where young master Cheon Muryang was. Confused, she replied that he was young master Muryang. He was shocked, touching his face without understanding anything. He looked down and saw his reflection in the water, horrified. That night he thought he had checked countless times, and this was definitely not a dream. He did not know how he had come back to life, and on top of that, 15 years into the past in Muryang's body. He wondered whether there had ever been anyone in the family named Mumyong, but the maid said she had never heard of such a person. He asked himself whether he had become Cheon Muryang, and because of that, his past self had disappeared. But perhaps this could be an opportunity, a chance to protect the Cheon family with his own hands. He would figure out how, step by step. After all, he had time, since the destruction of the family would happen 15 years in the future. But putting that aside, he wondered why his room was so messy and neglected, not to mention that its size was almost the same as an ordinary apprentice's quarters. Then he noticed a sword in the middle of the room, shining, and he immediately realized it was the same sword that had pierced him. That was the sword of heavenly light, a legendary blade born from a ray that cuts through darkness. It was the precious sword given to the young master of the Cheon family. He wondered if that meant the sword now belonged to him, which made him excited and eager to take a closer look. As soon as he drew it from its sheath, he held it out to examine it better. The blade even glowed. He thought it was truly a very different sword, far superior to those he had used in his past life. He began to make several moves with it, swinging it back and forth until he dropped to his knees, exhausted. He noticed that his breathing and muscles had already reached their limit from just that. A little later, still at night, he sat thinking that even if Muryang had never trained in martial arts, he should not be unable to swing the sword of heavenly light a few times. Normally, Ki is cultivated in the energy center of the lower abdomen and flows through the meridians throughout the body, but he wondered what was wrong with this body. He explained that large amounts of Ki were trapped in the energy center. Were they too great to pass through the meridians? These energies were colliding with one another, damaging both the meridians and the energy center. It seemed like those cases where rich children take spiritual medicine incorrectly and suffer a deviation of Ki, and the realization left him in shock. The next day, everyone was training with wooden swords, swinging them up and down, until one guy struck another on the head. The one who fell asked why he was hitting so hard when this was only training, and if that was the case, he should receive a blow as well. But the one who struck him said he was acting like a little girl. He had already said before that he would defeat him with one hand, and since he had lost the bet, he should hurry up and bring the money. If he was upset, he could raise the stakes and they would go for another round, but the other told him to shut up because that round didn't count. Then the two noticed something surprising. Was the young master really training? Was this a hallucination? Wasn't it the first time he had ever come to the training grounds? The other wondered what that scoundrel was doing there. Muryang was clearly tired from swinging the sword, completely worn out. He thought this was a mess, a body struggling just to swing a wooden blade. With a body like this, training with the sword was almost impossible. The other two wondered if he was already giving up, which was understandable, and told him to go away already since nobody here liked him. Muryang only thought about running, since losing weight was his top priority. That really caught the others' attention as they watched him. They commented that it didn't seem like he planned to leave anytime soon, and the skinny guy said that if he didn't want to go, then he would have to make him want to. As he ran, he thought things were far worse than he had imagined. Muryang's body was a mess because of all the spiritual medicines he had taken since childhood. The countless remedies were clashing with one another, turning into poison. He cursed Muryang, thinking that if he had trained diligently, he would have had astonishing martial potential. But first, he needed to bring this body to a state where it could properly absorb the spiritual medicines. The Cheon family's martial arts could come after that. Then he noticed a sword flying rapidly toward him. He barely managed to dodge, and the blade stabbed into the wall. Muryang wondered why a real sword was here at the training grounds. The same guys from before appeared, apologizing to the young master and saying they had accidentally let their sword slip during practice. One of them waved his hand, asking him to return it if possible, while they laughed and mocked him. Muryang thought they were damned bastards. They said this place was far too dangerous for the young master, and that he might get hurt by accident, so they recommended he stay locked in his room like he always did. The long-haired one wondered how this pig, whose only merit was his parents, dared to crawl into this place. A warning like this should be enough to keep him shut in his room. But then Muryang apologized, visibly surprising them. He thanked them for worrying about him and said he would be careful next time. Then he simply turned around and continued running, ignoring them. They started laughing, wondering what they should do, since that pig wasn't leaving and was still resisting. They said he had lost the bet and should hand over the money. As they walked away, they talked about how they had earned free cash and maybe should grab a drink to celebrate. But the long-haired man was not happy, least of all about Cheon Muryang. While running, Muryang thought those guys were pathetic. Warriors insulting their own master. It was absurd, but he would endure it, because he would easily lose in a fight if he retaliated. Anyone at their level could tell that just by looking at him. Still, it was fine. He would be able to learn the Cheon family's martial arts that he had longed to learn in his previous life. They were probably in the Celestial Dragon Library, and if he was Cheon Muryang himself, with the status of Great Young Master, he should definitely be able to enter it. But that afternoon, Muryang did not expect what came next. He asked what the guard meant, and the librarian said he would repeat it if necessary. Cheon Muryang, the junior head of the Cheon family, had lost his position. His entry to the Celestial Dragon Library would be denied. Muryang was left speechless. He truly had not expected that. He returned to his room, trembling, and soon sat on his bed deep in thought. Now the tiny room made sense. He had been expelled from the position of heir. He had planned to learn from the library how to quickly absorb the spiritual medicine's energy, but it seemed he would need to find another method. He began thinking. Not only had his own life been hard, but now that he reflected on it, even Cheon Muryang's life had been difficult. His body had been ruined by the side effects of spiritual medicines, and he was surrounded by enemies on all sides. Even subordinates insulted him. Cheon Muryang had been alone, just like him. He must have thought he had no allies in this house. Perhaps that was why he had come to see even his own bodyguard as an enemy. But he refused to think that way. Such excuses were unnecessary. The Cheon family had been destroyed because Muryang brought in the demonic cult. That was all. The reason he had no allies was the karma of his own scoundrel behavior. He himself had also been alone, just like Muryang, yet he had still devoted himself to martial training. Then he noticed a box filled with dishes. He wondered if Wolyong had prepared it. There were really a lot of mushrooms. He said she could have added some meat, and it was rather bland. How had Muryang gotten so fat eating like this? But at least, he thought, there was one person he could trust. The next morning, Muryang was warming up, preparing to start running. What kind of body suffered even from warm-up exercises? His whole body ached. Then Wolyong appeared, worried, asking if he was already awake. She brought new clothes and asked if he would train again today. He confirmed that he would. She wished him a good trip, and he noticed what she was holding and asked if those were his clothes. She panicked, saying she should have washed them earlier. She had waited for the young master to wake up before doing the laundry, but had ended up dozing off. He simply smiled at that. He thought she didn't seem like she would be of much help, but she was still his only ally here. He stepped closer, took her by the shoulders, and sincerely thanked her. She became very confused, asking what that was about. Muryang smiled and apologized, asking if she could work a little harder, since it seemed she would have a lot of laundry from now on. Then he quickly went back to running, and the girl was suddenly very embarrassed. A short while later, at night, Muryang was still running, tired and out of breath. He felt like he was about to die from running like this. However, this was not even half of what he had gone through in his previous life. He remembered a flashback of being stabbed with a wooden sword. A man asked where he was looking and why he wasn't concentrating. Did he want to go see the New Year festival? The man called him ungrateful. He fed him and gave him shelter, yet all he thought about was playing. He ordered him to know his place in this world and told him to perform 100 overhead strikes. Mumyong agreed without hesitation. Then he heard the young master telling his father that he was slow. If they didn't leave now, they would miss the lantern parade. They had to watch the acrobatics, set off fireworks. There were many things to do. He urged his father to hurry. Our protagonist wondered if he had ever done anything for himself in that life. He had had no choice. He had simply taken up the sword to repay the family head's kindness for taking in someone without a name. In contrast, what he felt now was only enjoyment. All of this was fun to him. Behind him, Wolyong watched him run, hidden, though she still seemed worried. He suddenly fell, but soon got back up. He thought Wolyong was stronger than he had imagined. In the days that followed, he kept running, even in the rain. The group talked about him, saying he had come back. He really was persistent, even running in the rain, but they told him to hand over the money already, since he had lost again. They always bet that he wouldn't show up. The long-haired guy said it was irritating and wondered why he was pretending to train now. The others told him to shut up because Muryang could hear, but it didn't matter if he did. Everyone knew he had lost his position as heir, and even if he became the head of the family, he wouldn't have any real power. What do you mean by that? Someone asked. The long-haired man said he was talking about the elders and, more importantly, whether Cheon Seonhak would really follow that pig's orders. They, the apprentices, would eventually become part of Cheon Seonhak's martial forces or belong to the Council of Elders, one or the other. Honestly, even if the young master became the family head, what could he possibly do to them? His friend told him to just accept it and not be like this just because he had lost a bet. Since the wager was over, they all decided to go inside. The long-haired man kept watching the chubby figure running in the rain, thinking he was certainly plotting something. Muryang clearly heard him say that. The man added, did he really think he would return to his former position just by training? It was pathetic, but Muryang simply kept running. The long-haired man was furious since he had heard everything, but the one who seemed even less pleased was Wolyong, who stood beside him. The next day, Muryang picked up a sword to begin his training. He swung it from side to side, practicing. It was a good start, he thought. He had gained enough stamina to wield a sword now, and if he kept practicing like this, the absorption of the spiritual medicines would be even faster. Then he heard a commotion, several people arguing. It was Wolyong, telling someone not to insult the young master. She and the long-haired man were fighting. Furious, the long-haired man demanded that she repeat what she had said, daring her to say it again. She told him to stop insulting her master. The people around them began to wonder what was going on, and soon realized that Nugrio had been bad-mouthing the young master again, and this time the maid had heard it. In any case, they decided to leave the two of them be and continue training, since they looked busy. Nugrio was enraged. How dared a mere servant oppose him? He quickly began to draw his sword, thinking he would place the blade at her throat and see how long that arrogance would last. But before he could even come close, his sword was parried by someone. He was confused, not understanding what had happened. Everyone wondered why the pig had stepped in front of the girl. There stood Muryang, pointing his sword at him. Nugrio was startled when he realized it was the young master. He clearly did not want to fight, but Muryang ordered him to raise his blade immediately. If he had anything to say to Wolyong, he should say it to him instead, with his sword. Nugrio asked if he was truly challenging him to a duel. Him, of all people. Muryang merely sighed. How about we call it a fight to the death? He explained that if Nugrio won, he would not hold this incident against him and would never set foot on the training grounds again. Was that enough? Woljung tried to stop him. Just a month ago, he could barely hold a sword. If this continued, he would certainly lose. But our protagonist drove his sword into the ground with force. He thought he could tolerate insults aimed at himself, but he could not overlook someone who cared about him being humiliated like that. This was his conviction. He told Nugrio to raise his sword at once. Nugrio asked if he truly promised to keep his word. Muryang said yes. He would never go back on it. Nugrio had not expected Muryang to act like this, but now that it had come to this, he had little choice. Besides, if he won, he surely would not be punished. All he had to do was defeat him. His swordsmanship, speed, and strength were incomparable anyway. There was no way that Fatso could beat him. Yet as he looked at Muryang's stance, a cold sweat ran down his back. What was this presence? This inexplicable fighting spirit? Muryang, furious, asked why he was just standing there. Was he afraid? If he wouldn't come, then he would go himself. He dashed forward and made a swift slash. Nugrio thought it was a good attempt, but he could see everything. Muryang was too slow. With this level of skill, how did he dare challenge him to a duel to the death? Then, as their blades clashed, one sword flew into the air and landed on the ground. It was Nugrio's. He was stunned. How had Muryang done that? Had he not been targeting him, but his sword all along? When he lifted his blade to block, Muryang had used that very force to disarm him. He didn't even recognize the technique. Did the Cheon family really possess such swordsmanship? How had that Fatso become so strong? Muryang reminded him that he had said it was a fight to the death. Yet he had swung carelessly despite having an opponent in front of him. Was that what the Cheon family had taught him? Nugrio dropped to his knees. Pathetic, Muryang thought. He didn't even deserve to hold a sword. We could see that Muryang's own hand was bleeding as well, but regardless, he told Nugrio to think about the reason he held a sword. Once he found that reason, he should come find him again, and then they would fight once more for that blade. Nugrio was left wondering about his words, his reason for wielding a sword. Muryang quickly called to the girl, saying it was time to leave. Nugrio tried to call out to the young master, but he did not even have the courage. Inside, Woljung bowed deeply, apologizing. She said she should not have acted like that. When she saw them mocking his efforts, she had been genuinely upset. He had even hurt his hand because of her. She should have stayed calm, and she begged forgiveness. Muryang thought that the bleeding hand was actually due to a technique that his body could not handle. It was not her fault, but he could not explain that. So he told her she did not need to apologize. She had defended him. He added that he could tolerate insults directed at himself, but he would not tolerate insults towards someone who cared about him. To protect his people, he would never allow it, no matter who the opponent was. Woljung turned bright red, embarrassed. She remembered the past, Muryang's New Year wish to become strong. He had said he would become a family head as strong as an elephant and protect everyone. Starting tomorrow, he would go to the training grounds and begin sword practice. He had even said that although Woljung was taller than him, he would protect her. Tears welled up in her eyes. This was the same young master she had always known. Then a man arrived, asking about what he had just said. Could he truly take responsibility for them? Muryang recognized him. He was the uncle of the body's original owner, one of the 3 pillars supporting the Cheon family, the Grand Master of the Celestial Dragon Sword Body and the Celestial Phoenix Sword Body, Cheon Seonhak. Muryang bowed, saying it was an honor. He admitted he had been ignorant and had failed to visit him. In his previous life, this was the Grand Master he had trusted and followed the most. He had never imagined meeting him again like this. His uncle told him to stop wasting time with useless courtesies and answer the question. Muryang remembered well how cold his uncle had been toward the young master 15 years ago. Back then, he had declared that Muryang had no hope of improvement. Muryang replied, how could he say something he could not take responsibility for? He protected his people. That was his conviction. But again, his uncle did not understand what he meant. He said Muryang's mouth disgraced those words. The technique he had used in the duel was the Dragon Claw of the Celestial Dragon Sword, one of its secret arts. Since he was not a member, he could not possibly have learned it. Therefore, he must have learned it illegally from a traitor within the Celestial Dragon Sword body, and that traitor must be someone close to him, one of his people. His uncle said he would immediately find that traitor and punish them severely. Anyone who sheltered such a person would also be punished. If Muryang wished, he could go ahead and try to protect them, and if he failed, he would be held responsible for today's disturbance and would be banned from the training grounds forever. Muryang understood. His uncle wanted to use this as an excuse to remove him completely from the training grounds because he found him unpleasant. From now on, Muryang realized he would have to choose his words very carefully. Muryang says there is no traitor, leaving his uncle confused and unable to understand anything. Muryang thinks that the one who taught him that was his own self in his past life, and comments that he only copied the dragon claw after seeing it by chance. His uncle begins to laugh uncontrollably, like a psychopath, but soon turns serious. He places his hand on his sword, says that this is ridiculous, and slashes through the air, creating enormous pressure around the two of them. His uncle says that someone like him could never imitate that technique after seeing it only once, and tells him to draw his sword. He would know directly from the techniques he used. Muryang faces the intimidating presence of his uncle head-on, and says that he already told him. If he still doesn't believe him, then he should show him a technique he doesn't know, and he will copy it just as he said before. That surprises his uncle, but he notices the wounds on Muryang's hand, and comments that he is still lying just to get out of this. That's enough. He can't trust a single word he says. He calls the maid beside him. She trembles in fear but answers. His uncle asks what kind of scheme the master she follows is planning, and if she dares tell even one lie, he will strike her down on the spot, terrifying the girl. She begins to explain that during the last month, the young master had been smiling all the time. Seonhak becomes confused and asks if that is serious, the same brat who used to explode in anger because of his inferiority complex. She confirms it. She adds that even while running laps around the training field, the young master was always smiling with joy. His uncle stares at Muryang for a while, and even our protagonist is surprised, since she truly saw everything. He thinks that for the first time in this life, he was happy to be working hard for himself. Wolyang says that even when others mocked him, he didn't pay them any attention, not even a glance. In the past, the young master would certainly have gotten angry or run away, but this time he didn't do that even once. Instead, for the first time, he drew his sword for her, to protect her. She says the young master had genuinely changed, and she believed in him. His uncle wonders about the girl's words, and asks Muryang directly what martial art he knows. Muryang answers that it is only the celestial divine art of the sun. Seonhak says that then he isn't so different from the other disciples, and he will give him 2 months, 2 long months, to defeat the best student he personally trained. If he can do that, he will believe Muryang's words. He asks him directly if he can accomplish it. The young master smiles, thinking that Seonhak always tested him like this in his previous life. But Muryang refuses, saying that 2 months is still too much and he only needs 1. His uncle remains silent for a moment, then sheaths his sword, turns around and says very well, so be it. Muryang asks Wolyang to go back now and comments that he still needs to run a bit more. Half a month passes. Muryang is training with his sword, swinging and striking. He thinks that during the last month he practically lived in the training grounds and reached the 5th level of the celestial divine art of the sun. Because of that, he almost completely melted the yang energy in his body. But the yin energy, different in nature from the sun art, he cannot dissolve. If only he could have learned a higher level cultivation method from the celestial dragon library, it would have helped greatly. He wishes his energy center could heal itself like his wounds. People begin murmuring, saying he might have a chance to defeat the young master, but they tell each other to shut up, since he might hear and run away before the fight. Then they say he can run if he wants. All he does is repeat the same strikes, and they already know how it will end. Muryang thinks spreading rumors must be his uncle's plan, so he will give up early. But he notices someone sitting there, telling them not to be so harsh on him. Maybe the young master still can't tell the difference between weeding a field and sword forms. Then the young master himself appears, and asks if they were talking about something funny. He asks directly if that man is Seonhak's best student, leaving him confused. The man says yes, it's him, and if it's about the match, he shouldn't worry. He will end things carefully. Muryang feels like he has seen this guy somewhere before and asks his name, Lee Sioki. Now the young master remembers. He didn't recognize him because his face looks clearer now, but this is the man who leaked information about the Cheon family to the demonic cult. Just thinking about it makes him furious. Muryang says he will remember that name and walks away. He had planned to simply do his best, but now he has changed his mind. He tells Lee Sioki to wait for it, that bastard traitor. Another half-month passes. On the day of the duel, everyone gathers in the arena, talking about how they can't wait to see the young master crushed. Some comment that he seems to have changed a bit, but the judge orders silence. From this moment, the match organized by Master Cheon Seonhak will begin. Call the fighters. Seonhak calls Lee Sioki into the arena, then orders Cheon Muryang to come forward as well. But Muryang has not arrived yet. The crowd wonders why he hasn't appeared. Did he really run away? They laugh, saying they knew it would happen. His uncle remains serious while Lee Sioki smiles, but Muryang finally appears. He steps into the arena looking completely different. Everyone wonders where that pig went and who this guy is. Our protagonist introduces himself. He is Cheon Muryang. The audience questions whether it's really him. It makes no sense. Muryang apologizes to his uncle for being late, but his uncle tells him to stop the formalities and prepare himself. They ready for the fight. Lee Sioki thinks what an annoying face. Does he really think losing weight made him confident? It's absurd to think he can face him after swinging a sword around for just a month. What the hell was Seonhak thinking? But this is great for him. The captain of the Celestial Dragon Sword and the captain of the Celestial Phoenix Sword are both watching. He will use this chance to leave a deep impression. Muryang can imagine him plotting to gain favor with his superiors. Lee Sioki is exactly that kind of person, a cunning, rotten parasite who uses people and clings to power. He recalls Seoki's future. After entering the Dragon Sword Corps, he approached power not through the blade, but through politics. With flattering words, he sold every piece of information he could to the demonic cult, blinded by greed. By the time he realized it, it was too late. In this life, Muryang will carry out the judgment he couldn't in the previous one. It's true Sioki hasn't committed the crime yet, that's why he must stop him. Everything until now must have gone according to Sioki's plan, but it's a pity for him. His career ends here and now. Muryang points his wooden sword at him. Seonhak says the match will continue until he declares it over, and reminds them this is not a fight to the death. The duel begins. Muryang rushes forward, leaping high to attack from above. Sioki thinks he already knows this. He beat Nungrio in a similar way, taking the initiative with some bizarre technique to knock away the sword, but this time, let him try if he can. Their swords collide. Muryang is shocked. Sioki smiles. They exchange several blows, but Sioki clearly has the advantage. He thinks he would like to show some mercy for the young master's dignity, but he can't waste this chance with all the great masters watching. He quickly grabs Muryang's arm, apologizes in his mind, and slams the flat of the blade into his stomach before kicking him away. Sioki begins to gather red power around himself. He tells Muryang to watch carefully, then charges and lands a clean hit. He says this is the difference in level between them. Muryang drops to his knees. Sioki thinks it's a shame his opponent is a scoundrel like Cheon Muryang, but it should be more than enough to show the Grand Masters his sword skill. He raises his hand confidently, certain he has won, saying it went exactly as he planned. They should enjoy his glory. Then he wonders why he can't hear anyone cheering. Something is strange. Why is the training field sideways? We see that he is the one lying on the ground, drooling. Muryang approaches and asks if he had a good nap. Sioki doesn't understand what happened or why he is on the floor like this. He realizes he can barely move his body, and his wooden sword is broken. He remembers the moment Muryang leaped when their swords collided, Muryang shattered his blade. From that instant, he had already lost. A direct blow to the head sent him crashing down. Did he really lose to someone like Muryang? Muryang says he is a potential traitor, leaving the man confused. The young master says he will let it slide for now, but he should watch his behavior from now on. He will be keeping an eye on him. Sioki says he only let his guard down, that's all. Anyone would have done the same if their opponent were a fraud who had trained for just a few months. Even so, he wonders what he should do now. He knows he is completely ruined. The entire audience is shocked that it ended in a single blow. Woolyoung cries with emotion seeing that he truly won, and he looks toward his uncle, who simply stares back. Soon the arena falls into absolute silence. A scarred man in the crowd thinks Sioki is an idiot. He ruined the perfect chance to expel that bastard from the training grounds. He is absolutely infuriating. Once again, everyone in the audience still couldn't believe he had lost with a single move, and they wondered whether it had been some kind of dirty trick. They also said he would only grow more arrogant now that he had defeated him. His uncle let out a sigh, accepting it, and was about to announce to everyone who the winner of the match was. But before he could, Muryang interrupted him, telling the crowd that he was aware of all the complaints they had against him. He had made many mistakes in the past, and they could not be covered up. He acknowledged that he was, without a doubt, a scoundrel. He had thought he didn't remember all the faces he had harmed, because those were deeds committed by Cheon Muryang, not by himself. But now he would bear the punishment for those sins, because he was Cheon Muryang. Here and now, he announced, he wished to apologize for all the outrageous behavior and misdeeds he had caused. Without hesitation, he bowed deeply to everyone in apology, and the entire audience fell silent. He added that if this still wasn't enough to satisfy their anger toward him, they should come to the training grounds at any time to speak with him, because he would be there from now on. Then he left together with Woolyoung, while his uncle simply watched, lost in thought. Shifting to Muryang, he thanked her for holding the heavenly light sword. He had prepared it just in case the duel turned into a real sword fight. She replied that she had been very nervous, but holding the sword had given her strength and comfort. He was glad to hear that and asked for the sword back, since he would carry it now. She asked why, and Muryang didn't understand what she meant. Hugging it, she asked if she couldn't just keep holding it a little longer. His uncle then appeared, asking what he intended to cut with that. Muryang simply smiled, thinking he would never hear those words again. His uncle asked about the sword he had shown earlier, and whether he was going to say what he had tried to cut back then. Smiling, Muryang replied that he had tried to cut the sky, nothing more. His uncle was left in shock, though he also found it absurd. Seonhak thought that this was the path of the sword he had tried to follow his entire life. Yet the one who understood that path was him, the person he had despised so much. Seonhak admitted that Muryang had won the bet and told him he could ask for anything, and it would be granted. Muryang quickly asked for permission to enter the Heavenly Dragon Library. His uncle said it could be anything but that, since it was beyond his authority. After thinking for a moment, Muryang instead asked for one person per day. He wanted to fight them. Seonhak asked if it was only sword training, nothing more. Muryang said yes. That was enough for him. He believed there was no better training than real combat. His uncle then turned and said he would grow stronger every day. The young master replied that it was exactly what he hoped for. Once his uncle left, Wool-young asked what cutting the sky meant. He told her it was something only he and the grandmaster could know. Meanwhile, the next day, a man was kicking stones in irritation. He wondered if Muryang really wanted a match every day, and just because he had gotten lucky once, he was becoming far too arrogant. He mentioned Sioki. From the very beginning, he had known that useless bastard had been showing off as the best student. But then he corrected himself. No, in fact, it had worked out even better than expected. He drew his sword and saw his own reflection, and with it, the past. Someone had been shouting, asking if they knew who he was. He was the great master of the Cheon family. Muryang had been drunk, holding a sword in one hand and a bottle in the other. The man asked why he was doing this. The people around them whispered that thanks to him, they had been able to come to this fancy tavern they could never afford, but that bastard just had to be here too. He wondered if he should leave. Someone asked if they should stop him, since at this rate he might kill someone, and they all begged him to stop. Muryang asked if he was some kind of joke. The man lying on the ground only pleaded for him to go back, because it was dangerous. Then Muryang lunged with his sword and slashed the novice directly across the face. He demanded to know who he was and why he was getting in his way. That was why he got hurt. He was an idiot for it. Muryang wondered if he was trying to blackmail him with self-inflicted wounds and said it wouldn't work, telling the man to get lost. Back in the present, the man cursed Muryang as a bastard. He smiled, saying he had pretended it was an accident, and he would most certainly leave the same scar on him now. His name was Cha Myung-hak, and he would be his opponent on the first day of training.